Some of you guys might have seen this tweet right here. It also probably has been floating around on Facebook groups. It's gone around on some of the major Reddits in the Wild Rift community, and it is this tweet right here. Several esports organizations, including Bigatron Esports, may be required to release their Wild Rift rosters as a result of signing an exclusivity contract with Moonton, restricting them to be able to compete only in Mobile Legends, thus denied the right to field a Wild Rift team. Which seems to me like Moonton knew that they had these exclusivity contracts and decided to enforce them only now. If they'd, I mean, I don't know when they'd signed these contracts. It would be weird of them to have signed these contracts after having signed Wild Rift rosters. It might be that Moonton had a contract renewal coming up with some of these teams, especially when it came to the Mobile Legends esports scene in Southeast Asia. And it might have been that Moonton decided that that they were going to enforce an exclusivity contract. And obviously, as all of you know, that Mobile Legends is just the bigger game in Southeast Asia right now. So a lot of these Southeast Asian focused teams like Bigatron, Nextplay, etc., they may have been kind of, or maybe may have felt pressured that really if they were going to deny this, they might not be able to get in on the Mobile Legends esports. I imagine Moonton said, if you don't sign this, if you don't sign an exclusivity contract, then you're not included in our upcoming esports events. But that is what it is. And to follow up on that, this did start happening. Nextplay were forced to release their roster, and unfortunately, all of the players on the Nextplay team were then released as individual free agents who wanted to be signed as individuals as well. So as you can see, it has already had an impact on some of these Southeast Asian teams. I don't know if any of the other teams have actually gone ahead and released their Wild Rift teams, but it feels like Moonton are now enforcing this exclusivity contract that they have. However, I find this really interesting. That's the background. Here's the opinion. I find this really, really interesting. Have you ever heard of the Barbra Streisand effect? If you haven't, and I don't blame you, some of you might be too young to have heard of the Barbra Streisand effect, but the Barbra Streisand effect is a cultural phenomenon named after an American celebrity called Barbra Streisand. The core of this story was that Barbra Streisand had a remote house on the shore. I think it might have been in California, but it was somewhere. And she really didn't want pictures of her house or the location of her house to be revealed. So paparazzi took some flying photos of her house in order to sell, and I think they were published in a paper. And she tried to suppress those images. And by suppressing those images, she drew attention to the fact that someone had photographed her house. Realistically, if she had said nothing, most people wouldn't give a flying feck where Barbra Streisand lives. It's a non-story at the end of the day, but by drawing attention to it and by fighting so hard to not have these photos released, not only did it make her look like she thought she was more important than she was, but also people started thinking, what is she trying to protect? What is she trying to hide? And so people went and found the pictures of her house, and then everybody started, basically found out where Barbra Streisand's house was. So it's called the Barbra Streisand effect because it's essentially drawing attention to something by trying to suppress it. And this to me feels like Moonton exhibiting a little bit of the Barbra Streisand effect, which is to say that by trying so hard to kind of suppress Wild Rift esports and limit Southeast Asian competitiveness in Wild Rift esports by trying to stop a lot of the sort of highly competitive teams from engaging in that esports program, they're drawing more attention to Wild Rift in general. The Wild Rift esports scene is new. The viewership is not that strong right now, and that is reflected in terms of the growing player base as well. Mobile Legends is clearly just the bigger. The bigger game right now. So therefore, by randomly drawing attention to Wild Rift esports, by trying to suppress Wild Rift esports, you're actually drawing more attention to the thing that you were trying to stop growing in the first place, which was really, really interesting. And I'm very, I'm keen to see how it plays out. Not only might it open up opportunity for some more low-level teams and maybe local and sort of passionate teams to get involved in Wild Rift Esports, we might actually also see some premier organizations step in. I know that, for instance, T1 has signed a roster. Don't be surprised to see more Korean teams sign rosters to try and fill the void for Wild Rift Esports in Southeast Asia that has attempted to be snubbed out by Moonton with their Mobile Legends exclusivity contracts. So I find it really interesting. To me, it feels like by doing this, Moonton are actually doing Riot a favor in the sense that they're raising awareness for Wild Rift Esports. Not many people will go. There are very few organizations in the world where people will kind of switch from esport to esport just because a different team is playing there. There is one organization, maybe two, that I can think of off the top of my head where that would be an actual, genuine, significant phenomenon, not just a small amount. Because if it was a significant phenomenon for these teams that were in Wild Rift Esports anyway, we'd have much higher viewership. There are two esports organizations worldwide that I think that can do this. The one is Carmine Corp, and the other one is Loud. I think that one's Brazilian and one is French. Those are two influencer-led organizations, and they're able to generate cross esports traffic despite maybe those people not really having much interest in the esport that's being played. But regardless, that's beside the point. This attention that is now being drawn by the larger player in the Southeast Asian region, which is Moonton, may actually draw more attention to Wild Rift and draw more attention to Wild Rift Esports unnecessarily, because clearly Moonton are doing this to prevent the growth of Wild Rift Esports. They're doing it to shut down Wild Rift Esports. They think that it could grow into a threat. I'm sure they don't think of it as a threat right now, but they think that it could grow into a threat, so they want to stop it growing. But by doing this, they're inadvertently drawing attention to it and may end up helping it grow. Very interesting little thing there, which I'm keen to kind of like see how it plays out. But you may have noticed here, the Esports Observer. I'm never going to be able to pronounce this guy's name right. He's leaving Activision Blizzard, and he's going to be joining Riot Games, and he's heading up the company's esports efforts for Wild Rift. So this guy is being brought in specifically to run a global program for Wild Rift Esports. So it is clear that Riot are investing in Wild Rift Esports for the long run, which, I think is... I'm split minds about this. You guys have probably heard me talk about what Vainglory did wrong with esports, but then you look at Riot, they are such a large company that makes so much money that maybe just investing a small amount into esports is the right thing to do because it draws competitive players, and there are a lot of Arena of Valor players that have come over to Wild Rift for the competitive side of the game, because the Arena of Valor, competition outside of maybe like Thailand and Vietnam and some countries like that is pretty non-existent, especially over in North America and Europe. So you're getting a lot of ex-North American and European AOV players now playing Wild Rift because of that promise of competitive esports side of things. So yeah, it's clear that Riot don't care. And I've seen some Riot employees say, actually, I'm going to show you Chizin, who is a pretty vocal project manager. He's a really, really great guy. And essentially, where did he say this? He tweeted recently saying, "Don't worry, we're never going to restrict," which, here we go. Been receiving multiple inquiries regarding Wild Rift teams in Indonesia. We would like to reassure our players that Riot SEA does not restrict Wild Rift SEA esports teams from participating in other mobile esports leagues, and we empower our teams to exercise freedom of choice in this space. Clearly showing that they're being the bigger man in this scenario and saying, do you know what, Moonton, you do what you want to do. You just look like a child in this scenario. You clearly see us as a threat if you want to try and stop teams from playing in our league. We're happy for teams to go and play in whatever league they want because we don't care. We're Riot Games. We're much bigger than you will ever be. Which is, basically the stance that I get the vibe from it. And they're really just saying we are the bigger man in this scenario, or the bigger company. So yeah, interesting. What do you guys think? I feel like it's a ridiculous decision from Moonton. It is A, making Riot look like a threat to them, and B, is drawing more attention to Wild Rift Esports, but they could have really, by doing nothing, Wild Rift may have actually, just grown at a slower pace. But by drawing unnecessary attention to it, You know, you're drawing otherwise maybe non-engaged Wild Rift players and maybe even players from other games towards Wild Rift Esports to at least check out what is so important that is getting shut down by Moonton. So it's really interesting. You know, I think Moonton, and just to be clear, I think Moonton are well within their rights to do this. I should have maybe should have said this very early on in the game. If you sign an exclusivity contract, that's not really Moonton's fault. I'm saying that Moonton putting it in their contract is, you know, whatever. But if you sign an exclusivity contract with Moonton, that's kind of the team's faults, and they didn't really have much foresight on that sense, and maybe didn't read the contracts properly, or it was just a recent contract that they were forced to sign. But it's well, you know, Moonton are well within their rights to do that if they think they have the power in negotiating that they can force exclusivity in mobile titles or exclusivity in competing mobile titles. Then so be it. That's something that Moonton feel willing to do. But there we go. What do you guys think? Let me know. Comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this esports thing that is going on right now, and whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, whether there are some silver linings. Let me know. I'd love to hear. See you soon.